So today I'm doing stuff with my underutilized low-profile Corne keyboard. So as the name suggests, a low-profile keyboard has a lower height compared to a normal keyboard by about 8mm, I think. It makes the keyboard a bit more comfortable to type on and makes it more portable. Now the only problem with low-profile keyboards is that they don't have that many switches available like normal MX switches, and since I'm a tactile switch person, the default pale brown tactile switch doesn't offer a lot of tactile feel, which made me resort to using heavy yellow switches, which are, well, heavy to compensate for the tactile feel. So today this thing came in all the way from Canada, which are the LDSA keycaps and the low-profile Sunset Tactile switches designed by lowprokb.ca. They came in these neat paper tubes, and the keycaps came in with this disclaimer about having to shave down the keycap stems before putting them onto the switches. I'll get to that later. So here's the Sunset Tactile switch that many tactile users have been waiting for so long, I think. Well, at least I have. Out of the box, I can feel that it has some tactile feedback, a bit of scratchiness, and a slightly noticeable ping. The creator says the switches were factory lubed, so I don't think I'll be lube taping these. Better to have them tactile rather than risking making them linear just to make them quieter. So as usual, we take out all the keycaps and switches from the keyboard and replace them with the Sunset Tactiles. At this point, I totally ignored the disclaimer and jammed the keycaps onto the switches because I figured since normal Kale low profile keycaps would stick onto the switches when I pull them out anyway. But then when I tested the keys, I found out that I jammed the keycap so hard onto the switch that it ruined a hot swap socket, making the whole key not registering anything even when changing switches. To show you what I mean, here's a normal pinhole and this one's the jammed pinhole. I learned my lesson, so I shaved the corners of all the stems on the remaining keycaps. Since I busted the socket, I quickly ordered hot swap sockets, desoldered the busted socket, and soldered in the new one. Did a test, looks okay, put the keycap on, and while I was at it, I replaced this LED here since it looks like it's been dead for a while. Screw everything back, remove and install switches on the right side, and while doing a test on the left side, I found out my Z and B keys weren't registering even when changing the switches. So what happened, I think, was when I jammed in the keycaps for these switches, I pushed them in so hard that it ripped off the hot swap sockets from the solder pads on the PCB, which made them not being connected. So what I had to do was to try and play around with the switch legs with the tweezer and press on the switch to see what key was registered. Then I just had to jump wire them together. By the way, you can see from these two keys, I gave up on having hot swap switches and simply tinned the connections in place. Since there were jumper wires here and there, I had to cut and trim off some of the in-between acrylic layers that were used to reduce typing sounds. Do a quick brush and reassemble everything, also praying that I don't bust any other hot swap socket on the right side keyboard. And now I have LDSA keycaps with Sunset Tactile switches on my low profile Corne. A bit of a review. The LDSA keycaps, I think the surface is slightly too rough compared to Chosfox or basic OEM PBT keycaps, but the scoops are nice. The sloped thumb keys are designed well, while the dotted home keys are, well, for me, a bit too pokey as I'm so used to using MT3 home keys with deeper dishes. For the Sunset Tactile switches, they're tactile. They're not as scratchy, I think, and I barely notice any ping when typing. In total, although it doesn't give the same tactile satisfaction that I have with Harimau switches and the fingertip hugging sensation of MT3 profile keycaps, it's way better than having heavy linear switches on Kale's default flat keycaps. So yeah, that's all for today. I learned that 1. You should read and take things seriously if the seller puts in a big ass note disclaimer along with what he's selling. 2. I shouldn't jam keycaps or switches onto hot swap sockets because it might rip off the sockets from the solder pads and maybe the solder pads from the PCB too. And 3. I also learned how to jump wire switches, and that's a cool thing, I guess. はい、以上です。ご視聴ありがとうございました。Thanks for watching.